Before we get to the questions, let's introduce our panelists. Today we have with us NYC Service's very own Chief Service Officer, Paula Gavin.
Greetings. Welcome to our first Google Hangout for NYC Service. We're so excited because we know that volunteering is good for you. You live a happier life if you volunteer, a healthier life, and it's great for your personal mission and your professional mission. So it's truly an opportunity for you to do for yourself, but do good for the city. And for that, we think we want you to know and thank you. And so let me tell you just a little bit about NYC Service. We're an agency of Mayor Bill de Blasio, and our mission is to promote volunteerism, to engage New Yorkers in volunteer service, to build volunteer capacity, and to actually mobilize volunteers to address the city's greatest needs. Service is actually a national movement right now. AmeriCorps exists, as well as Cities of Service, as well as our own efforts to really promote years of service. Service can actually connect residents. It can solve problems, and it can make our country stronger. That's why our vision at NYC Service is that we want to inspire and empower all New Yorkers to volunteer. We want you to volunteer for your city. We want you to become involved in education. We want you to become involved in helping others with economic development. We want you to become involved with the environment. And we know we need you to be involved in emergency management. So from all of us here at NYC Service, we want to thank you for your service in the past, currently, and in the future.
Thank you, Paula. And we'll go to our next panelist, Executive Director of New York Cares, Gary Bagley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Bagley. I'm the Executive Director of New York Cares. I'm thrilled to be here today to be part of this chat. New York Cares, in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, provided over 25,000 filled volunteer opportunities throughout the Rockaways, coastal Brooklyn, and Staten Island. So we've spent the last couple of years thinking quite deeply about really how everyday citizens can best engage as volunteers, both in the immediate aftermath, the immediate response to a disaster, as well as long-term recovery efforts. We have a long history of doing this, starting with the events of September 11th, 13 years ago now. So I'm thrilled to be here. You know, at New York Cares, we live and breathe volunteerism, which is why our partnership with NYC Service and OEM, the New York City Office of Emergency Management, are so close. We all rely so heavily on volunteers to make change in our community, and we all are so passionate about the impact that volunteers can have. So thrilled to be here and looking forward to speaking to your questions and hearing more.
Great. Thank you, Gary. We're very excited to have you here, too. Next, we'll go to Herman Schaefer, Director of Community Outreach at the Office of Emergency Management.
Hello, everyone. My name is Herman Schaefer. I'm the Director of Community Outreach here at the Office of Emergency Management, your Office of Emergency Management. I am a Director in the External Affairs Division, and we live and breathe and work with volunteers every day. Some of our most committed individuals in the city are CERT volunteers, Community Emergency Response Team volunteers, and they're responding to and helping prepare communities around the city 365 days a year. But also, we value our partnership with NYC Service and New York Cares because we can't do this alone, and really the connection that you see here just at this Google Hangout is so important to us because we can get deeper into communities, we can engage more people in volunteering, and as Paula said, you know, service during an emergency and after an emergency, we all know for the last 2 years has been so critical to the city rebounding to catastrophic events, but also locally occurring events in your communities every day. So I'm glad to have the chance to talk to you more about volunteering. And I love showing this partnership because it's such an important one to us.
Thank you, Herman. And actually, our first question of the day is geared towards you. So let's go back to Herman. And this is a question we got off of our Facebook. And the question is, when I think of emergency response, my first idea of helpers are the first responders and not everyday citizens. Is an average New Yorker really cut out to help in an emergency? What kind of training do you need to volunteer in emergencies?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm glad to be here to help change some hearts and minds on this one. When you think of first responders, most people think of our great police and fire department that we have here in New York City, and yes, they're the ones who are going to be doing the heavy lifting on the emergency response. But I've heard this said, and I've seen it in action. The average citizen is usually the first person on scene. If there's an emergency happening, it will take some time, a few minutes, even a little bit longer for our first responders to get there. And the average citizen is the first person that is on scene during an emergency. And so the best question is what sort of training you need. And the good answer for that is that you should seek out a volunteer opportunity that fits you. So New York Cares works on emergencies. We have in the NYC service partnering with us to help us with sheltering volunteers and people who might be doing commodity distribution, food, water out in the communities. We have the CERT volunteers, which is a 10-week intensive program that requires a year of service afterwards, or suggested a year of service afterwards. And then we have really good opportunities for community groups and individuals to learn more about what they should do in an emergency, and really, having their families prepared, getting out there, learning more about how an emergency happens is so important, because then you know how best to react. And really, that's the training you need, is if something happened in your neighborhood, would you know what to do? And that basic level of training can help keep you safe and help your community in ways that you wouldn't even know. So yes, there are great opportunities that take time, commitment, but there's also opportunities for you just to know more about. And hopefully you can check out our website and get involved.
Great. Well, thank you, Herman. That was a wonderful response, and we hope that we can change some people's minds as well. Our next question is for Gary Bagley of New York Cares, and this one comes off of Twitter. So, Gary, tell us, what are the biggest challenges with work in the disaster recovery field as a nonprofit?
Well, there are several very big challenges, and Herman definitely spoke to the fact that the ultimate first responders are neighbors, local citizens. One of the biggest challenges of immediate response is that the number of people who want to help is enormous. Very often in the wake of a disaster, there are all sorts of challenges in the community that we also have to be very mindful of. So there are a huge number of people that want to help. The second part of that issue is that the immediate needs are not always clear. They haven't actually evolved to the point where the everyday citizen and the nonprofit group knows what help is necessary, where, and when. And for volunteers, that's very challenging, right? Because we want to go, if we have 2 hours of work, if we have 2 days, we want to go where the need is the greatest. So I would say the biggest challenge is that sounds like a basic management challenge. And within that, every disaster is a little bit different. So although we can learn general practices and general approaches to how we're going to handle each situation, on the day of the situation, the kind of folks who are impacted, the specific nature of the disaster, changes what we have to do in a more specific way. So I think also, as Herman was talking about communities and individuals being ready to think about what they can do in the event of a disaster, many nonprofits have huge needs in the wake of a disaster, but they may not have relied on volunteers heavily before the disaster. So they don't have necessarily the systems in place to think about how they can thoughtfully use volunteers and manage the experience well. So I think for the nonprofits, for the volunteers, and for the community at large, that immediate week or two of understanding where do we need you, what are the best uses of the volunteer. That 2-week period is the biggest challenge. As the needs evolve, as a good management system evolves, and we rely on communities to both be resilient already and to prepare in advance so that that 1 or 2 week period can be shortened, which is our ultimate goal. So I would say those are the biggest immediate response issues that I see.
Awesome. Well, great response. And I like that you brought up the volunteer management because actually New York Cares and NYC Service have a partnership, the Volunteer Impact Program. So all you nonprofits out there listening and watching with us, stay tuned because we will have links to that in the end.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that. And our next question is for Paula Gavin. So this question comes from Twitter. And the question is, what are the benefits to a volunteer willing to help its city in a time of need?
Well, the immediate benefit, as we've heard, is that if the individuals has already prepared themselves, that will help. So I wanted to echo Herman's point that if each of us were to have the preparation and the materials we need to take care of ourselves and our families and our friends, that's the first benefit that you could give as an individual. So please go look at that OEM website and have yourself prepared. The second is what Gary indicated, and Herm also, which is there are ways to be prepared ahead. So if you were to go to our website, nyc.gov/service, you could learn about Emerge NYC, and in fact you could train yourself ahead working with us. So preparation and then really developing the skills are great. When the actual emergency happens, I would say the benefit to New York City is we need people. We need people to care for each other, for their neighbors, to be there in their communities, and to be patient to get the opportunities that maybe are the bigger opportunities. So if I were to summarize what I hope each person on this call and even each person in our city prepare, find a way to get some training, either through Emerge NYC or some other ways, and then during the emergency, just help your neighbor first, help your friends, help your family, and then be patient for the assignment that we will give you.
Great. Thank you, Paula. And actually, we've got a question just in from Twitter, and this question is, what is the best way to know something is an emergency? And I think we'll hand that one over to our Office of Emergency Management expert, Herman Schaefer. Herman?
Thank you. It's a great question. And it's a great question because everyone generally thinks of an emergency as something like Sandy, where it's very clear that it's an emergency, that the entire city's been affected. But you know, when I talk to people about emergencies, it can be something as small as a fire in your community. And so, you know, to echo everyone's previous comments, that in an emergency such as that, let's say it's a fire affecting maybe several families, and they're out of their house, there's incredible benefit to a community coming together to support those individuals, because first responders and the traditional volunteer organizations working with disasters are only there for a short time, and the community is there for the longer term recovery. So that's when you know it's an emergency. As I always like to say, there's not an emergency unless humans are affected, and so you know it's an emergency when you see the effect on the community, or you see the effect on individuals, and you know that there's a community there to help them. So the stronger the community, the better the recovery.
Oh, great. Thank you. And our next question is for Gary of New York Cares. Gary, our viewers would like to know, what are the transferable skills that volunteers gain from disaster recovery work?
That is a terrific question, and I would say there are two really big, wonderful transferable skills that whatever kind of job you go to can be very beneficial. One is crisis management. For all of us as citizens, when we step into an emergency, the situation changes. So we learn to be adaptable, we learn to be flexible, and very often we learn to take initiative. in those moments. I would also say that volunteer management, managing others, is an immediate and transferable skill. Most work post-disaster takes place in large groups, and those people who either come in with management skills or who step up to make sure that other individuals are well managed and highly efficient and productive post-disaster are a huge help. And then, of course, that is a situation you can use in just about any work environment, and the kind of skill that that also helps to get you promoted. People recognize that skill in others. I would say then the third skill changes based on the disaster. As we saw post-Hurricane Sandy, many volunteers came in to help with what we call muck-out operations, cleaning out basements, helping to throw out furniture that was wet. People were cleaning sand out of driveways, and then as the long-term recovery has taken place, we have been training volunteers to help with rebuilding efforts. So certainly people who already have skills in that area are a tremendous benefit. And we have a lot of individuals who've really learned those skills on the job and are now thinking about maybe how they can use them in other areas of their life. So I think those kind of transferable skills change based on the nature of the emergency that we're responding to, but there are often very concrete tasks that we both hope people will come in using, and then well-managed, well-structured volunteer programs also give people a chance to learn some of those skills as well.
Great, thank you. So I hope all our viewers out there heard that. There are lots of skills that can be gained from volunteerism, so get out there and volunteer. Okay, so we have one more question, or a couple more questions, I should say. And this one is for Paula, and this is just coming in from Twitter now. So this question is for Paula, and it says, how can teens under 18 volunteer and get involved in service?
Well, I love that question because one of our goals is to elevate youth service and leadership as really a developmental strategy for our city. Our young people have incredible talents, and volunteering helps them to use those talents. So it's a great question. During emergencies, as with other times, really the school is the best place. We are working in partnership with the Department of Ed, and it's a program where every school does use service and service learning as a strategy to build self-esteem and confidence and skills just like Gary mentioned, organizational skills, supervision skills. So the best way for a young person under 18 would really be to touch base with their school, because their school will give them the best resources and the best access really to those volunteer opportunities that suit their capabilities. But I do want to just repeat, it's such a great question because it lets me emphasize that at any time we know youth can bring their energy, their commitment, and it can change their life by helping someone else.
Great, thank you, Paula. All right, let's go to our next question, and this one is for Herman. I get that it's important to serve in emergencies or times of need, but how will I know when to get involved? So, Herman?
Yes, and there's a lot of good questions that are coming up, and it gives us a chance to really give some good information out there. You'll know when it's, in a lot of cases, it's you have to do some research and on the best way to get involved. As they said, we're going to be putting out resources to existing groups, and oftentimes the best time to get involved is right now. Because the skills that you learn, the training that you get will help your community, and you will be the trusted person in your community. And so therefore, if you have the time, you have the energy, and you have the interest, the best time is to get involved is right now, because you'll get good training, and honestly, your community will be stronger for it. The more people who are well trained in the community, the better the community knows what to do. Now, if after post-disaster, the best time to get involved is when you see a need, and there are lots of needs out there that that only the community knows about and only you know about. And if you get involved with that, you can help solve problems. You can let people know what they need and make sure the resources are getting to that. that person, to that community, and so the best time to get involved post-disaster is ongoing. There are still people who need post-Sandy 2 years later, and there's a lot of volunteer opportunities to be able to help people in their communities. So you can get involved beforehand, get trained, be a resource to your community during a disaster, and then post-disaster, the needs go on for much longer than you think, and the time to get involved is through that whole recovery time.
Great, thank you. And so we'll go to one of our last questions for this NYC Service Live Google Hangout, and this one is going to be for Gary. So Gary, our viewers want to know, what was your toughest volunteer experience?
Wow, that's hard because I have many years of doing having volunteer experiences. I would say I would call this tough in the sense of what I would call personally difficult was going out to the Rockaways, which is where I had the opportunity to go immediately following Superstorm Sandy. It was difficult on many levels, of course, to see people struggling in the immediate aftermath, to see the devastation that people had in front of them. And then the other thing that was actually very difficult about goes back to that first point I brought up earlier, was also because I work in volunteer management, I could also see how many people wanted to help and the challenges of distributing people in an even way to where they were needed most. You know, we were relying on our Twitter accounts, we were relying on email, we were calling each other from street corners to say, there's no one here, can you send someone? And then there were pockets where there were too many volunteers for whatever the particular need was at that moment. So I found that to be very difficult because I could see the need, I could, if you will, see the lack of distribution in those first days, and I don't think it was possible, because of the scope of the issue, but it made it a very difficult experience for me and a very emotional one. The other side of that, and I think many people can say this, for those of us who work in volunteer management, it is a business based on caring. So one of the other things that was so difficult, New York Cares staff members were out in the community wanting to give back 12, 16 hours a day and trying to help people also take care of themselves, right? Because it was obviously going to be a very long process. And so it was very difficult to always make sure that the folks that I have the honor of working with were taking care of themselves as well as attending to the big needs of the community. And that's a very difficult thing for me.
Great, thank you, Gary.
Sure.
All right, so we've got one last quick question for all of you, and it's just going to be super quick because we only have about 4 minutes left. So this is for all our panelists, and I'll start with Paula first, but you all will get a chance to answer this. So, do you have any special words of encouragement for someone on the fence about volunteering, especially in disaster relief?
So my word of encouragement is that anyone can volunteer and everyone has talent. So the first thing I'd encourage is if you want to become involved, particularly in times of emergency, please go to our website and look at Emerge NYC. It is a great way for you to be trained. And then the second thing is, in general, jump into volunteering. You'll be healthier, you'll be happier, and we think that you'll give back to yourself, but also to your city in a very meaningful way.
Great, thank you, Paula. And Gary, do you have any special words of encouragement to any volunteers on the fence about volunteering?
I would say first, volunteer now. As Paula said at the beginning, there is proof everywhere that it makes you happier, it makes you healthier, and it builds stronger communities. And at the end of the day, in an emergency, the resilience of the community that we're building today will help that community when there is an emergency. And as Herman said, we're all going to face one. So you have the power to do this, to start now, and you will feel better. So go get started.
All right. Thank you, Gary. And Herman, do you have any words of encouragement for people out there on the fence about volunteering?
Sure, I'll wrap it up. I mean, if you're interested in it, if you have any interest in disaster, now's the time to get involved. You get great skills. Every time I go to a training class, I learn more and more about my community, about how it works, and it's a fantastic way to give back to your community where you live by providing information. And just on a personal note, it's great to be the person who knows stuff. Mm-hmm. And volunteering gives you the opportunity to have the inside track, to know more about your community than anyone else, and to know more about a disaster when it happens gives you such a charge. It's wonderful. So, if you're on the fence, go to it, learn more about it, find the opportunity that works best for you. There's lots of them out there, and get involved and get some knowledge.
Great. Thank you, Herman. All right, so I'd like to thank each of you personally, Paula, Gary, and Herman. Thank you so much for joining us on our first episode of NYC Service Live. And in true NYC Service tradition, I'd like to present each of you with a NYC Service water bottle. So here you go. This is for all of you. Woohoo! Woo! Stay hydrated. All right. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of NYC Service Live. Stay up to date on all of our volunteer opportunities throughout the city. Visit our website, nyc.gov/service. And definitely get involved. Stay up to date through our social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Our handle is @NYCService, or you can just head to our Facebook and like us there. All right, everybody. Thank you again. I'll signing off, your host, Steph, and we'll see you on our next edition.
Bye-bye.